Can Luka Doncic get revenge on Marcus Morris? Is there redemption for Kristaps Porzingis? And can playoff P finally show up for the Los Angeles Clippers? This is the gray area right here on Kevin Gray Sports. My name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And make sure you hit the notifications button so you know when the videos drop. And you can find me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers, 105.3 The Fan. The Mavericks and Clippers' biggest storylines going into their first round matchup part 2 as the Clippers look to take out the Dallas Mavericks once again this season in the NBA playoffs. The Dallas Mavericks finished 42-30 on the year, the 5th seed in the Western Conference. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Clippers 47-25 finished as the 4th seed in this year's Western Conference playoffs. Some big storylines going into this series after the backdrop of what happened in the bubble last year in Orlando, where the Mavericks pushed the Clippers to 6 games. We all remember that we came to find out that Kristaps Porzingis had torn his meniscus in Game 1, played the next couple of games, including a 34-13 game in Game 3, and then in Game 4, Luka Doncic hit one of the most epic buzzer beaters in NBA playoff history to knot the series at 2. The Clippers, though, went on to stave off the Dallas Mavericks and complete the series by winning it in 6 games. So now you fast forward to this year. Obviously, there's a lot of heat in this matchup given what these two teams went through in the NBA playoffs in the bubble seasons ago. But here are some of the bigger storylines coming into this year's version of Mavericks Clippers. Obviously, you got to start with MVP candidate Luka Doncic, who this year averaging over 28 points per game, over 8 rebounds, nearly 9 assists per game, continues to be an incredible player at 22 years of age, should be a first-team All-NBA performer for a second year in a row, and now will have to carry the load once again in a playoffs where you saw last year the defensive length of a Marcus Morris, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard tried to get after Luka Doncic. Now, Luka Doncic played extremely well in that series, averaging over 30 points a game against the Los Angeles Clippers. But this year, there's going to be even more on the line given what he was able to do against the Clippers last year, especially against Marcus Morris. Now, we all know that Marcus Morris, not necessarily the cleanest player, if you will now be matched up once again against the Dallas Mavericks and one Luka Doncic. Here is Luka Doncic talking about not only the trash talk that he expects to see in the series, but specifically how him and Marcus Morris buried the hatchet. Here's what Luka Doncic has to say.
Luka, you mentioned a lot of trash talking in the series last year, and obviously a lot of that was with you and Marcus Morris. A lot of heated moments. What are your thoughts on matching up with him probably guarding you a lot again?
I mean, it's going to be okay. He's a hell of a player, hell of a defender. Trash talk is always there. And if it's not, you're not really competing. So it's going to be great. Actually, he apologized to me on the one that he stepped in the game we played in Dallas, I think. And, it's all good. But trash talking is always going to be there. And like I said, if you're not going to trash talk, you're not really competing, especially in the playoffs.
So Luka Doncic saying, hey, look, Marcus Morris apologized to me for stepping on my ankle when they came to Dallas a little bit earlier this season. Okay, cool. But that doesn't short on the playoff intensity that will be in this series between these two players, especially for Luka Doncic, who is a hyper-competitive individual who wants to continue to get better and, more importantly, prove that he can help get this Mavericks team over the hump. That's just one storyline that you look at, especially knowing how good defensively the Los Angeles Clippers are this year. This is a team that is 8th in the NBA in defensive rating, while also number 3 in offensive rating. So you know defensively how good this team is going to be, especially with the length that they present with respect to defenders such as Marcus Morris, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and others to try and get into the mind and, more importantly, try and get into the airspace of one Luka Doncic. There's also a secondary storyline here when it comes to your man Kristaps Porzingis. As I mentioned, his season was ended a year ago in the bubble in the NBA playoffs while he was playing terrific basketball against the Los Angeles Clippers, highlighted by that 34-point, 13-rebound game in game number 3. The much maligned Kristaps Porzingis, obviously because of the injury history and the health concerns that he has played pretty well in the last 3 games to end the regular season after missing the previous 7 with right knee soreness, and before that had missed a few games due to an ankle injury. His health and his ability to be available for this Mavericks team is going to be critical for this opportunity for the Mavericks to try and create an upset against the Los Angeles Clippers. Is there a measure of redemption for your man KP as he tries to put himself in position to be the true number 2 in this series given the firepower that the Los Angeles Clippers present? Here is Kristaps Porzingis talking about the idea if there's any redemption for him personally, knowing what happened to him last year, to try and put himself in the best position to achieve that redemption. Here is Kristaps Porzingis.
And KP, obviously the rematch with the Clippers in the first round, part 2. Do you look at this as any kind of personal redemption for you, given how your season ended in that first round series, given the injury that you suffered and how well you were playing prior to that injury?
No personal, beef or no personal. It's not personal. At the end, we as a basketball team are trying to get better with each year and with each game and with each, whatever. And it's again the Clippers. We look forward to, competing against them again. They're a more experienced team than us. Have some guys that have went all the way and won it all. So it's going to be a great challenge for us, and we're looking forward to it. And, I think it's it's not personal. We're just going in there, and trying to play our best basketball as the Mavericks.
So Kristaps Porzingis saying, look, not really. There's no personal beef, no personal animosity, no personal necessarily redemption for me. But you have to know in the back of his mind that he wants to put on a performance worthy of a player that either A, rebuilds his potential trade value for this team going into this offseason, or shows the Mavericks front office, GM Donnie Nelson, Mark Cuban, and others that he is part of the long-term future of the Dallas Mavericks going forward and can be the quote-unquote true number 2 for this team going into its future, especially when you're looking at a Luka Doncic who is staring down the barrel of a max extension, given the fact that he'll make another All-NBA team this year. For the Clippers, can playoff P finally show up for the Los Angeles Clippers in terms of Paul George? He's had a spectacular season, over 23 points per game, over 41% from the field. What's scary about the Los Angeles Clippers is they got 4 guys who shoot at least 4 threes a game, and all of them shoot over 40%. In fact, this is the number 1 3-point field goal shooting team in all of the NBA at over 41%. The Mavericks are 13th this season when defending against the three. So Paul George's and Kawhi Leonard's, also guys like Patrick Beverley and others who can shoot the three well, can they continue to do so? Nicholas Batum, when you start thinking about the others on this team, can they continue to shoot the three ball well and continue to put pressure on teams from the three-point line? Because you know what you're going to get from them defensively. As I mentioned, 8th in the NBA in terms of defensive rating. This is also a team in the Clippers that are number 2 in overall net rating this year. So they can shoot the ball from the three-point line, they can defend you, and they also can punish you on the boards. Ivica Zubac, who in this game, or in this year, continues to play well on the boards, can punish the Dallas Mavericks when it comes to rebounding the basketball. Now, when you start thinking about other storylines in this series, yeah, I'm not ignoring the one that everyone is kind of thinking about here. Your man Rajon Rondo gets to see your man Rick Carlisle all over again. You all know the histrionics of Rajon Rondo and how things failed miserably here in Dallas. Even Rick Carlisle talking about the trade a few years ago and saying, look, the trade wasn't a good fit for either one of us. It simply didn't work out. Your man didn't collect his playoff shares when the players voted not to give him his playoff shares a few years ago. It didn't work out with Rajon Rondo. So that's a secondary storyline when you start thinking about it. But more importantly for the Mavericks now, can the supporting cast of this Mavericks team put themselves in position to give Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis the kind of firepower it needs to combat a very deep Los Angeles Clippers team when you start looking across the board at the Serge Ibaka's, the DeMarcus Cousins, the Ivica Zubac's of the world, and can they provide the kind of offensive firepower needed, especially a guy in Tim Hardaway Jr., a legitimate sixth man of the year candidate, second most threes made in franchise history this year, averaging over 16 points per game, and has been able to play well as a starter and off the bench. You remember the 42-point game that he had against the Detroit Pistons where he carried the team offensively and saved them from an embarrassing loss there. He goes to Miami, drops 36 points, and ties a franchise record with 10 three-pointers. His ability to remain hot offensively is going to be critical for this team going forward. Jalen Brunson, also with his ability to be a guy that can penetrate the lane, is a much more capable three-point shooter now and a secondary playmaker. He is going to have to continue to make plays and, more importantly, remain consistent, especially when he's able to close in fourth quarters when he needs to. But the guy that I'm looking at is your man Dorian Finney-Smith, who has been absolutely spectacular, especially during the second half after coming back from his COVID bout and the birth of his second child. Dorian Finney-Smith, who had his best month of April where he had over 13 points per game, shot over 50% from the field and well over 40% from the three-point line, has become much more aggressive in seeking his shot, willing to penetrate the paint, and get himself in position where he's making plays for himself and his teammates, and more importantly, has been really good in the clutch this year. You're talking about a guy who's hit 8+ shots in the clutch this year and really given this Mavericks team a lot of confidence that Luka Doncic can trust his teammates, especially in big-time situations. Yeah, I know there's no Maxi Kleber right now. How he continues to get healthy, especially from the Achilles soreness that he's dealing with, is going to be a real X factor given the versatility that he provides on the defensive end. Dwight Powell and others who've been inserted into the starting lineup playing at the center position provide the energy and hustle on the defensive end while providing the kind of rim running that Luka Doncic has taken advantage of, which they will need to in this series against the Los Angeles Clippers. Even Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic have been playing well in the pick-and-roll situations as well, a little bit more underrated than what folks want to give them credit for in their ability to play in the pick-and-roll together. But the last thing is Josh Richardson. Things haven't worked out necessarily the way that the Mavericks wanted to with respect to the Josh Richardson-Seth Curry trade. He is going to have to show up in this series against the Los Angeles Clippers in a big-time way. The Dallas Mavericks this year are 9th in points allowed per game this year. We've seen at times this team be really good defensively, and we know what kind of starts they have to get off to in order to win games. This team finished 27-0 this season when leading after the first quarter. Can they be the same team that can clamp down defensively like we've seen against teams like the Knicks at times, where they held them to 86 points in their own building and most improved player and probably second team All-NBAer Julius Randle down in their building? Those are the kinds of defensive efforts that you're going to need to see. But Josh Richardson is going to have to show up and be the kind of 3-and-D guy at the perimeter at 6'5", a guy who can at times shoot the ball from the three-point line and can defend. He will have to show up with the kind of consistent regularity that will allow the Mavericks to try and upset this team in the first round of the NBA playoffs. This team, of course, won the season series 2-1 over the Los Angeles Clippers. Here's Rick Carlisle talking about how difficult a matchup this is going to be given how much improved this Clippers team is from a year ago versus what they were in Orlando. Here's what Rick Carlisle had to say.
Rick, your thoughts on a rematch with the Clippers?
They're a great team. We certainly have a level of familiarity from last year's playoffs and also playing them 3 times this year, but their team is different this year. And so we're going to have to, do a very close study and figure out the best way to go in terms of matchups and how to defend and attack them.
So Rick Carlisle is saying, look, this is going to be one tough matchup. This Clippers team is obviously deep, they're talented, and have projections of winning an NBA championship. But for the Mavericks, these storylines and others are going to be extremely important for them to try and find themselves winning this game. I haven't forgotten about Dwight Powell. I haven't forgotten about guys like Tim Hardaway and Jalen Brunson who are going to need to be huge, obviously, in this series because Luka Doncic can only carry this team so much. The supporting cast and how they will be tested in this series will go a long way to tell us how well this team can play in a series against the Los Angeles Clippers, who are as deep and as talented as any team in all of the NBA. When you've got a guy in Kawhi Leonard who's a 2-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP, and a guy like Paul George looking for his own kind of playoff redemption in this series also, and not to mention the Nicholas Batums of the world, the DeMarcus Cousins, the Ivica Zubac's of the world, the Serge Ibaka's, and others who are talented and play well on the team. Rajon Rondo with his playoff leadership coming off an NBA championship a season ago. Lots of storylines abound in this series, but obviously the Dallas Mavericks looking to get a measure of revenge against a Clippers team that handled their business a season ago against them in the NBA playoffs. Should be a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And don't forget to hit the all notifications button so you know when the videos drop. And catch me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers, 105.3 The Fan. It's been another episode of The Gray Area. We'll talk to you later. Peace.